name is John Gross. I'm the founder and CEO of Fat Earth Media. We're a performance marketing agency that's really heavily focused on creative strategy and creative execution for our clients. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that when I introduce Savannah and Jason. We're going to talk really specifically about our individual skill sets and how that comes to life when we think about things like what we're going to present today. So I want to start off with just introducing what this conversation today is all about. So I think the first thing is, what is ecosystem thinking? In this particular case, it's really just simply the idea that we need to move beyond, as marketers, particularly as things continue to evolve, we really need to move beyond this narrow, siloed view of marketing and advertising constraints in favor of paying much more attention to the entire system. And so the point of the webinar today is going to help you all understand a little bit more about how we think about how the media environment is changing on a broad level. Although we continue to see, new channels come out, diverse places to spend your media dollars, generally there is, a bit of a consolidation of channels as well as people's attention, happening really across the market. And I think the brands and agencies that are the most successful right now, they are still paying attention to those areas where they can get quick wins, where they can carve out, a smaller niche media channel to really expand their customer base and get efficient returns on investment, but really paying attention to how things are expanding and continuing to consolidate over the course of the last 1.5 to 2 years and into the future is going to be really important, I think, for brands to continue to succeed. And the barrier to entry for channels like Meta and TikTok, they're constantly changing, and I'm sure most of you on this call are feeling some restrictions in terms of the ceilings or the potential for returns. And so we're going to really talk today about how to think about strategies and channels beyond just paid search and social, and hopefully gain some confidence in ultimately making that transition into TV. There's a lot of traditional media channels that you can go into. TV obviously isn't the only place to expand beyond paid search and paid social, but in this particular case, that's what we're going to be talking about. And we think it's a really good consideration for a lot of direct consumer brands. And if you remember one thing from this call, is that you probably already have the resources and the data that you need to make these really, really confident investments in these expanded channels. And so I don't want you to think about your first foray into TV as being something that's fully net new or that you're doing in the dark. And you shouldn't be thinking about these bigger media investments as being binary. Like, it doesn't have to be 100% direct response versus 100% brand awareness. And if you're an operator and you really understand your business's objectives, then I think you can craft better media strategies that are going to facilitate longer term growth beyond thinking about just the ROAS within a single paid media or distribution channel. And so who are we? We're sitting here talking to you today, pretending like we're experts. So I want to kind of present kind of who we are as a group presenting this material today. We're part of the Red Antler group. Red Antler is one of the leading brand agencies here in the States. They're located in Brooklyn. And together, we're really brand obsessed specialists that really share a rigorous approach to our best in class expertise. We're a handful of different agencies, Fat Earth, Red Antler, and Wild Fruit, that occupy kind of different parts of our clients' ecosystem. We really service them based on what we do best. Again, Fat Earth being more paid media, Red Antler being brand, content, naming, packaging, and Wild Fruit doing a lot of deck and pitch deck work. But there's also a lot of overlap, a lot of space for the three agencies to really collaborate and build products and services for our clients that are even more value add than what we do by ourselves. So you'll get to meet Savannah and Jason in a minute, and they can talk through some of their expertise as well. And together, we define and scale some of the best brands in the industry. I'm sure most of you recognize several of these. Just kind of wanted to give you all a little bit of frame of reference for the types of brands we work with, because if you see yourself and some of the folks represented here, then hopefully the context that we're talking through will make a little bit more sense today. So I think this slide is a little bit less to introduce myself, Savannah, and Jason. It's a little bit more to talk about our experiences, our expertise, and how that really has framed these conversations and these strategies, and how you might think about building the right teams in order to start thinking about these bigger picture ideas. And so again, I'm John Gross, founder and CEO of Fat Earth Media. My background is mostly in performance marketing and paid media, but I've always had a lot of passion around creative and storytelling. as an early media buyer, I was always, I was somewhat frustrated when I would be working for a client and we couldn't quite get enough creative inputs or the right creative inputs in order to improve their accounts. If you're a media buyer on this call, you know the struggle. You understand that it's not just the technical execution, it's also the way you're showing up, particularly as Meta continues to change their algorithm, deprecate targeting features. We're leaning more and more into that creative asset to do the targeting for us. That signal is really incredibly important. And if you're a media buyer on this call and you don't have access to the creatives you need, your job is just going to be more difficult. And so we quickly built a full-scale, full-service creative department within Fat Earth, which is led by Savannah Wisham, who's our creative director. And her, and in combination with our CMO, Caitlin, we've really built this strategically led, high-end creative shop that really services clients across the spectrum of direct response all the way up to brand awareness. And I think that transition part has been really important for our success and really plays into what we're going to talk about today. And lastly, we've got Jason Moran. He's a group creative director at our sister agency, Red Antler. And Jason really drives like cutting edge brand strategy and storytelling for some of the most impactful and category defining brands around. But what's really important is his past expertise and really understanding media buying and the channels that these assets that we're talking about today are ultimately going to show up in really allows him to ground his perspectives in the reality of what performance needs to do and what it needs to look like. And I think, again, kind of going back to that ecosystem thinking idea, this isn't just creative for creative's sake. It's also not just paid media for the sake of spending dollars. It is kind of considering that full spectrum and thinking about what's working on these smaller channels that are very tactical, very like down to the single dollar. What's the most ROI positive, and trying to tease out those variables and those default fundamentals about your product that are really driving engagement and driving results, and allowing that to ladder up into your media plan and into your creative strategy at a much more holistic level. And so, most of you on this call, probably all of you are running ads through Meta. And for most direct-to-consumer brands, and today we're going to talk about one of our clients, Skinny Dip, quite a bit, the majority of their spend, the majority of their strategy is usually focused around Meta. Now, there's obviously some exceptions to that point. There's TikTok, there's a lot of other places that you can show up, but still a lot of businesses at scale and through the launch period are leveraging Meta in a really substantial way. And so typically brands go to market, they launch into Meta, they scale their business, and they start to think about what is next. And usually, they scale as much as they can. They start to hit some ceiling. They start to have diminishing returns. And it's really difficult for them to figure out like what is the next step. And today we're going to talk a lot about how TV can be that next step for you. And hopefully we can build some confidence around how you can get into those other markets without it feeling like a huge financial risk. And so just kind of thinking about like, what does this usually look like? And this is some real, a real graph that we've pulled from a lot of different accounts. And where this inflection point happens for any particular brand is dependent on a lot of different things. It could be your addressable market, it could be your product market fit or your product channel fit. But over time, you're going to start to saturate, how much you can get out of a single channel. This happens because of competition. It may happen because of, lack of creative variability or understanding how to scale behind specific creatives. And motion obviously has been a big part of how we've, reduced or how we've helped elongate this curve for most of our clients. But regardless of how good we are at creative, regardless of how many amazing assets we can get into the account, if you're a single channel brand, or if you're just running Meta, Google, and TikTok, you're going to start to have these ceilings because those particular channels represent and contain finite addressable markets. And again, for some brands, this might be really big. For some brands, it might be kind of small. And then also some of these channels too just have content limitations. Meta, for example, we know how important the first couple of seconds are. Within motion, I know we're all running reports around hook scores, and that can be really important and it can be a way to get in, but other channels will represent the appropriate space to tell longer format stories. If you're on TV, you can have 15 and 30-second cuts that folks are essentially going to watch the whole thing, where we don't really have that on Meta, sometimes on Google, and definitely not on TikTok. And for brands that have larger stories to tell or bigger educational series that they want to lean into, this transition can be super helpful. And generally, whenever we launch TV on top of a really successful Meta, Amazon, Google, TikTok strategy, we typically see a pretty big lift to all of those channels, not just good results in terms of brand awareness and actual sales through our D2C channel. And I think another thing that people typically overlook is, the cost. I think this is probably the biggest barrier to entry that we deal with whenever we start to talk to our clients about TV. It's usually something that's met with a bit of fear, quite a bit of resistance, but meta-first brands are pretty consistently relying on traditional channels like TV to expand their reach, to build brand awareness, to lower CPAs, to lower CPMs, and in a lot of cases, and in this case for Skinny Dipped, to really support retail. I think that's another big part of this, is that standard D2C channels can do a really good job of showcasing brand awareness, of getting reach, of promoting your brand and pushing you forward. But at some point in time, the bigger, more sophisticated direct consumer brands typically have omni-channel distribution. And there are channels like TV that are going to really satisfy business objectives beyond just driving an immediate sale to someone's website. And so typically what this chart is showing is that around $250,000 a month, TV typically has a lot lower marginal cost per acquisition opportunity. This is a chart we've taken from one of our partners, Tatari, that I'm sure many of you on this call are familiar with. We work with them quite a lot for TV advertising. They've got a lot of data around this type of thing that I really recommend you look into. But keep this in mind, like if you're spending $250,000 a month, either in Meta by itself or across your top 2 to 3 channels, this can become a really important and practical channel for you to look at. And so lastly, how do you make the leap into TV confidently and seamlessly? And I'm going to pass it over to Savannah in a couple of slides, and she's going to get really specific about how to look at the data. But again, going back to my first point is, most of you on this call already have enough data and enough assets to really start to do this without a massive investment. And so we kind of think about this in 4 major steps. The first being common sense analytics, identifying the KPIs that actually matter at each part of your funnel. The next part, leveraging motion specifically, it's how we do it, is what we call finding the formula. So really trying to match those actionable learnings to a creative taxonomy and finding real ways that you can define those and understand what's really working across your assets so that you can transition that into another channel. It's never going to be one-to-one from Meta to TV, but as Savannah is going to show, there's really smart ways to do it that give you a lot of confidence and really get you off to the races with a bit of a head start. And then turning that into channel-specific concepting, again, translating those creative insights that we typically already know with a high degree of specificity through channels like Meta, and again, translating that into TV. And then production. Sometimes this can be nothing but post-production. Sometimes this can be totally net new. But Jason's going to talk a bit today about forgetting the rules of TV. There's a lot of value to be had in a lot of different approaches here for getting those assets that are really appropriate for really high-end, strong TV commercials. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Savannah, and she's going to talk through a couple of these aspects in much more detail.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. So good to be here with you today. I'm going to start us out by looking at the first step of that formula John just presented. So we all know that the first piece of understanding any audience is really to get into the analytics, to start to get to know them and understand what resonates with them, what they're clicking on, what they're interested in. So obviously we love motion and really find their approach to data visualization invaluable. We use them on all of our accounts, but really getting that clear understanding of KPIs like click-through rate, thumb stop rate, one of our favorite motion metrics, and then view through, of course, ROAS. These are all key to performance marketing, but to understanding our audience as well. So they really help us get to know what's resonating in the moment, but also on an emotional level. So we start to see some common themes that really move the needle at each step of the customer journey. And with Skinny Dipped, that really began with a retail support strategy that evolved into a greater understanding of our audience's desires and tendencies. So we really saw that concepts that scaled and click-through rate that soared for their creative had featured messages like guilt-free deliciousness or transparent messaging around sugar, what was in the product. And this began to really tell the story of what our audience cared about and what we started to see as a trend. One area we really wanted to lean into was exploring little treat culture and really starting to understand what folks out there are finding to be resonant with Skinny Dipped as they're finding them through Meta. So by drawing out these deeper insights, we're really actively de-risking their channel expansion. So with this testing, with this creative strategy, we begin to understand those key themes, those elements that really become fundamental to the way our audience engages with the brand. So this means that as we start to build that bank of elements and understandings, that we get more channel agnostic learnings. So these through lines are ultimately going to guide a brand beyond just Meta or YouTube, whatever platform we're learning from, and help to begin guiding them into new channels. So this is really where performance marketing expands beyond the channel being tested at hand and really can help you make the leap to somewhere new. In this case, that's making TV less of a leap into the unknown because you already have the data with the help of motion to really help you understand what's resonating with your audience. So that's how we get started here. In the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit more about building a taxonomy, starting to differentiate your creative and learn. So this takes time, takes reps, but it's what we call finding the formula. So to do this for Skinny Dipped, we've worked with them for over a year now, and we've really created a robust and diversified strategy that's helped us build a bank of insights that we can begin testing into other channels with. So while we know that motion is obviously an incredible data visualization tool, really essential to what we do, it's only going to show you the insights based on what you feed it. So this is where the creative strategy comes into play. We want to make sure that we're testing different formats, concepts, visuals, messaging, hooks, creators. Y'all know all the different elements we want to explore. And that's really all in service of giving the Meta engine the ability to pair that right creative with the right audience. So for Skinny Dip, that meant following the lead on our learnings around guilt-free deliciousness and really focusing on the amount of sugar as well as the taste. So you'll see we started to explore some in the creative featured on the right here. We're playing with guilt-free treats. We're exploring the snack goals language, and then also really trying to play more into just the frameworks and the different concepts and the different types of content that we're testing. So you're seeing we're playing around with some polished brand photography. We're doing some lo-fi UGC, really testing within different frameworks to diversify the account. And that ultimately gave us a greater understanding of what's resonating with our audience while still supporting their retail goals. So we're driving our overall strategy while getting those more emotional connections defined and getting to know who's resonating with Skinny Dipped more and well. So while we know our main audience and we get that understanding of what they like, we're starting to get to know more of what kind of the zeitgeist of the world is interested in when they're discovering Skinny Dipped via Meta. So this is where we ultimately are striking a chord with a larger group of people, and those varied learnings are helping us find that through line that we can use across platforms. So with Skinny Dipped, we were really able to confidently move the snack and the treat language into our taxonomy, which helped us build a naming convention that we can then track and understand what's resonating. So we map that naming convention back to our KPIs and get the learnings of what's most impactful here. So we know how invaluable it is to understand your click-through rate, to understand what's stopping the scroll, and finding out that combining this snack language with a really beautiful product hero is something that we can start to bring through to other channels. and start to see success with that elsewhere. So this is all of the thinking and analysis that goes into what we call finding the formula. So we take all of these ingredients that we found, we bring them together, and it really starts to make a clear path to developing ads that resonate with your audience and ultimately increase our understanding of the broader demographic beyond just your core. So month over month, we're tracking wins. We also want to know what's not working. Y'all know it's important to understand both sides of it. So we really use all of those pieces to understand what's driving performance. And then we start to capture that red thread that's really going to be a through line beyond just the channel at hand. So this is where we're really actively building our confidence in being able to test a new channel ahead of time with an already proven approach. So John, on the next slide, I'll give you all a little sneak peek here. I can't show you everything yet. The spot isn't live, but this is how we're bringing it all together. And we're using that historic knowledge from Meta for really any platform as a way to leverage what works and take those proven elements as a foundation for a new channel. For Skinny Dipped here, it's TV, which is a really exciting way to expand their world. So this, again, a D2C brand that we've helped grow their retail presence while also gaining those emotional truths about our audience and preparing us to step into this new channel with confidence. So now we're able to use that winning formula from our message, our meta testing, and effectively translate that to TV. So we know Travis mentioned in the chat, I think maybe digital platforms, Meta wants short, attention-grabbing, thumb-stopping content, and TV really offers us the opportunity to spend more time with our viewers, to tell a richer story, drive more emotional connection, but still keep that performance mindset top of mind. We know that's what got us here, so let's lean into those learnings as we start to concept specifically for the channel. So Skinny Dipped, what that really meant for us was leaning into that snack language, the angle of guilt-free deliciousness, and really the taste and experience of enjoying the product. So again, really exciting to see the Skinny Dipped world expand beyond the 9x16 and into this bigger format and getting out of the feed into a more intimate viewing experience that we hope has a longer attention span. Of course, we want folks to watch this through, not just jump away. But that means we need to respect the medium of TV. So instead of optimizing for that quick scroll stopping, maybe jarring moment, we have the opportunity to build tension and character and storylines that really give payoff in a way that isn't always possible in Meta. So while we're still seeking to grab that attention, we're using those learnings around click-through rate, thumb stop rate, our formula from Meta as we expand the Skinny Dip world here to really be something vibrant and colorful. We have a main character that really captures a cool confidence of the brand with some tone of voice we've experimented with on Meta, and just captured some cheeky moments that I'm really excited for y'all to see. So we're incorporating some of the language we found successful in those direct response ads, along with a more brand forward lens to really meld those learnings together. So that means we've got a well-crafted TV spot that maintains our direct response principles where relevant and also reinforces long-term brand equity. So the goal is really to elevate that proven formula into a TV-ready execution, one that's harnessing the strengths of the medium while really staying true to what's already driven engagement and results. So I'm going to pass it over to Jason now, who's going to tell you a little bit more about what TV is looking like these days.
Awesome. Thanks, Savannah. I'm now going to be a bit of a spirit guide for the journey into TV, because I think for advertisers who are in that growth mode, scaling to TV can feel like this really big deal. And the reality is that it's not a really big deal. Like all of a sudden your brand, its story, its identity are about to share a screen with blockbuster entertainment, right? Like Shogun, Severance, White Lotus, content that eventually will get memed by Evan Ross cats. Like you're there too. And there's also kind of that big, bold silhouette of the Super Bowl, all those spots that feel like they sort of cast this great big shadow creatively over whatever you might end up making. Like, does it need to hang and be in the caliber of that work? I do think any pressure that you feel, whether it's driven by an experience in the channel, hearsay of mega million production budgets, or it's just the advertising industry's sort of general preciosity and kind of historical overinvestment at times and traditional approaches to TV. It's a lot of pressure, but it's just pressure. The reality is that the way we ideate, plan, produce, create TV commercials has really drastically changed. It's not your mother's television commercial. I think a lot of what Savannah talked about, sort of some of those contemporary principles for creative marketing today, flexibility, adaptability, iteration, experimentation, all of which have really been propagated by that like rise and eminence of social content, mobile first content creation and advertising. Like those are all still really relevant for the way that we creatively approach TV as a channel, both from the way we ideate for it, also through to the way that we produce it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think generally that idea of blindly going straight from this abstract idea on a page to a high production investment TV commercial, the idea of a creative director, sorry to Savannah and myself, in an ivory tower coming up with your silver bullet for you, uninformed by anything, that really is less relevant than ever. And so TV can be less of a leap of faith than it might seem. Data can be your driver creatively. And I think as John and Savannah so expertly mapped out, that really is the case with Skinny Dipped. On the next slide. So you've decided that you're going to press go on TV. First, really want to think about what the role of TV is as a channel in relation to social, in relation to where you're coming from a creative point of view. We really see social as a mirror. It's a place to reflect your consumer's way of seeing the world and seeing your brand back to them, both from a storytelling perspective, but also from a production point of view, as you know. Lower fidelity, phone first creation, really creative that foregrounds the authentic voice of your audience in its form. TV, on the other hand, we see as a bit more of a magnet. It's aspirational. It should create a pull by way of creating a different kind of elevated desire in the creative. Creatively, it really should feel just more sensitized, charged, crafted, can be a bit more polished and slick in its form. Yes, that's true. But it doesn't need to compete with Game of Thrones. It can be really self-aware about the content that surrounds it creatively, but doesn't need to try to hang or like force an investment to compete with that. Number two, yes, I just said that creative should be more polished or even more considered in TV to some degree, but that doesn't mean that you have to spend $1 million to achieve that. We at Red Antler have shot awareness TV spots on a $150K production budget in the office in Brooklyn. If you paid attention to the Super Bowl a few years back, Reddit really won the advertising game with what was effectively a static PowerPoint slide that aired for 6 seconds. Coinbase with its simple 2D floating QR code, kind of the same. I think all to say there's a spectrum, right? There's a rubber band to how you show up. And I think as Savannah mentioned, really what matters most is that TV is about a story. It's the story that's happening on screen and the way that it interacts with the viewer. It's about character development, tension, and really like working within the medium, thinking about duration, leveraging a sound on environment to your advantage, a high impact visual language, thinking about disruption like those Coinbase and Reddit examples, being really hyper aware of what's been done before you in your category, outside of your category, what might cause you to blend in or recess in the channel, and finding ways to really zag that. So when it comes to actual production, there are kind of 3 paths that we see here. The crawl, if you will, might be leveraging existing content. So this would be the cheapest, most efficient approach, taking UGC that's been successful for you in a paid format and stitching it together into a really slick edit, or using product renders in a fully animated environment. I think you probably have more TV relevant creative already produced and in the bank than you might think. The walk approach would be really streamlining production. So set a budget number of what you're willing to spend all in, and then back your creative ideas into that figure, right? Make sure that you're sort of tailoring the investment to what you've got. And then the third would be once you've dipped your toes, maybe gained your sea legs in TV, and this would be our recommendation after you've maybe crawled or walked first, then you really have permission to run, right? You can go deep, engage premium agency and production partners for that sort of full court press, gloss and polish. Game of Thrones, all you want. The third, and I think everything that John and Savannah spoke to really underscores this, but while TV can be a really big swing, right, it no longer has to feel like blind faith and big risk. It can be highly informed and highly shaped by in-market creative learnings from social, whether, as Savannah walked through, that informs your actual big creative idea, like with Skinny Dipped, or is even more tactical in the choices that you make, like a specific product descriptor or message that's over-indexed in its resonance. Or maybe you're referencing like a seemingly niche way that people experience your product that you've learned actually has this broader appeal. Like, I don't know how you eat your Oreo, right? But there could be a whole campaign around that based on what we learn in feed. And I think data and insight from in-market creative performance and social really is just, at the end of the day, an opportunity to buttress how you de-risk your TV production investment, right? To make sure that the production is also high ROI in its approach. Okay, fourth, this is probably the most spiritual of everything I've said, but last but not least, as the wonderful Faith Hill so memorably sings, just breathe. It's just a TV spot. The word spot is also a great name for a puppy dog, so it doesn't have to be big and scary and growling at you. I think just remember that you've already been in your audience's feeds, in their literal hands, taking up their full phone screens, right? Which they arguably might care more about than their TV sets. If you had to take one away, I think I could probably bet which one it would be. So just release some of that pressure, let go of the preconceptions that are in your head about how this all should go, and dare to err. Thank you.
It's time to ship more winning creative with Motion's creative analytics platform that helps you scale winners into unicorns and helps you figure out where your ads might need just a little more help. Join over 2,100 teams shipping winning ads with Motion like Viore, True Classic, Hexclad, and more. Get a free VIP tour today, and you can see how Motion can help your creative strategists and your media buyers speak the same language.